Hi, I'm Bill Parisi. I'm the founder of the Parisi Speed School.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And I started my company basically as an undersized athlete. I was a high school athlete, football player, track athlete, and got involved in the javelin and competed in the javelin at a high level. And went to Europe when I was in college and learned some incredible training techniques. Came back and started sharing those techniques with anyone that was willing to listen. You know, coaches, athletic directors, athletes, parents. When I was a young athlete training to throw the javelin, you know, we did a lot of medicine ball drills. I went to Finland when I was 19 years old to learn from the best, Tapios Kuros, who won the gold medal in the javelin throw in 1988. I went to Finland to seek him out, to train with those guys because they're the best in the javelin. They've been the best for a long time. And to learn their techniques, and we learned a lot about medicine ball training. When I came back, I did a ton of medicine ball drills, ton of functional drills, and what happened was my body started to change. I became more elastic, and I didn't know what it was. It was just, you know, thought my muscles became more elastic. And over time, I've always, kept true to those principles and applied not only medicine ball training, but the dynamic movements we were doing, and as a track and field athlete, brought that into the speed school. And then I realized as time progressed, I continued to go to seminars, and at some seminars, a guy by the name of Dan Path, who's a world-renowned track and field coach, was talking about fascia-driven athletes compared to muscular-driven athletes. And I really was inquisitive, and I said, Dan, tell me more about fascia. So we went to dinner. I was with Dan for a week, and he started sharing some research and articles with me, and I became fascinated. So I said, I'm going to write a book on this because not many people really understand that this newly discovered organ in the body is trainable and has 10 times more the proprioceptors than muscle. And I'm like, how can anybody not know about this? I mean, this is amazing. So I did a deep dive and researched the top people in the world, people like Dr. Tom Finley, Tom Myers. I interviewed Robert Schleip, all these different people, founders of the Fascia Research Congress, Michel Delcourt, all these real high-level experts when it comes to fascia and training fascia, wrote the book. And I was just amazed because the discovery came about not only when I was an athlete, knowing that I was training, my body, and I thought it was the muscular system, but as my son started to play more competitive basketball, and he got invited to some high-level tournaments at 14, 15 years old, I was at some of these tournaments and I saw 15-year-old kids dunking and playing at the rim and getting down the court in 5 strides. And I'm walked around, asked these kids, what do you do for training? And they say, I play a lot of basketball. They didn't really do a lot of training, but they were some of the most athletic kids I've seen in terms of just assembling hundreds of them in one facility. And then I came to realize there's an athlete such as a fascia-driven athlete or a connective tissue-driven athlete, AKA a Kevin Durant, or a muscular-driven athlete, which is a LeBron James. You look at those athletes, and Kevin Durant, you can see, is just more tendon and connective tissue-driven. And LeBron James is just more muscular-driven. So their homeostatic state, their drivers are different in terms of how they respond. And this is a newly discovered approach in terms of fascia. The Fascia Research Congress only came out and started in 2006, and they're having their 4th Congress. They have a Congress every 3 years in 2021. And the research around this is still relatively new, and the reason for that is we never had the imaging equipment, the technology to really understand fascia and really look at it and look at the makeup of it. Now we do, which is really interesting. Fascia is a connective tissue. It's an extracellular matrix, so it's outside the cell. It's comprised of mainly collagen and water. 90% of it is collagen and water, different types of collagen. And then predominantly what facilitates or creates fascia is the fibroblast cells, which actually spool fascia throughout the body based on the stresses we put on our body or the lack of stress we put on our body. So here's an example. Fibroblast cells are basically little spiders that crawl all around our body, everywhere. There are millions of these fibroblast cells, just little spiders. And they cast fascia webs, collagen fiber webs, throughout our body based on the stress or lack of stress. So if I'm sitting in a chair or sitting on a long car ride for a long time, most people think, oh, my hip flexors are tight. Well, it's not really the hip flexor musculature, it's the fascia that's getting spooled that's creating that tightness. And these new spider webs that are getting formed, and once you stand up after a long car ride, you break apart those spider webs. No different than, breaking apart a spider web, in the corner of your house, right? And what happens is, if we're in a position a long time, say we're sitting at a desk for a long time, our shoulders are rounded and they're protracted and we have this rounded posture. Well, the fascia buildup from the fibroblast cells, that spooling of fascia now becomes thicker and thicker and thicker, and now you need real serious body work to break that up. So it's the fascia that makes us tight and stiff. So this fascia is developed based on the stress or the lack of stress we put on our body, and the reality of it is it's also can be trained in a good way to help us become more dynamic and more explosive. All systems are always in play when we train. So, always training all systems. So when we do a specific type of training, say a bench press, well, that's more of the muscular system. If we do some type of oscillating movement, say like jumping rope is a more of a fascia system. It's more of a tendon kind of connective tissue training modality. Typically, to train the dynamics of fascia or to create that spring-like fascia that we want in athletics, it's more of an oscillating type, continuous, submaximal load, repetitious movement. So the key thing to training fascia, there's different ways to train fascia. So we want to train fascia, say for dynamic spring, right? So we're going to do an oscillating type of continuous, submaximal load, hopping, jumping, running, things of that nature that are going to develop that, but continuous and long term, like a jumping rope or different types of sprint drills are more fascia driven.
So like this, right? Lunge to the left and hold for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and back up. That's beautiful.
Other ways to train fascia are odd positional strength approaches, meaning multi-directional, multi-vector submaximal load training. So what we call it is omnidirectional submaximal load. So an example would be Viper. Michel Delcourt invented the Viper, and that's a big tube which is about 4 feet long, and there's different weights, anywhere from 4 kilos all the way up to, I believe, a 32 kilo Viper. And holding this Viper, moving this Viper, where it's transcending the force throughout your body, from your hands, through your arms, posterior, anterior, lateral lines of fascia. So it's creating that force and that vector of force through your body in odd positions and stabilizing that. That's the key, because the fascia is the cellophane wrapping that kind of holds everything together, gives our body its structural integrity in a lot of ways. Around the muscles, fascia is interwoven between all cells, muscles, nerves, arteries, organs, blood vessels. Fascia is what the farm boy has. So, if you had two athletes, one was a farm boy, grew up on the farm, and one boy was, in the weight room lifting, and there was a wrestling match amongst them, most people will bet on the farm boy because he's got that farm boy strength, that natural kind of strength that your Mason might have, right? Imagine, somebody, have an uncle or somebody in your family that's a Mason, right? They're lifting cinder block, they're lifting heavy bags of cement all day long. They have connective tissue fascia strength. That's different from weight room strength. And what makes them strong is the fact they move submaximal loads in omnidirection. So lifting bags of cement, lifting bales of hay, rotating, moving, omnidirectional, all different directions with submaximal loads, is training the fascia. It's training the connective tissue that gives the body more structural integrity, but absolutely more strength. And by having more strength and having maybe more, I should say, stronger, more dynamic fascia, that helps facilitate co-contractions that creates ultimately more strength. You know, it's interesting because we've been dissecting bodies for over 500 years, you know, and studying the human body, and we always knew, you know, fascia existed, but we didn't feel it had any value. You know, a lot of surgeons push it aside. It was just this tissue in the body that didn't bring any value to the human body. And wasn't until recently, Dr. Tom Finley, he's an MD, PhD from Rutgers University. He started looking at this system close to 40 years ago, and now recently, over the last 20 years, we have now the imaging equipment that shows that this system has 10 times more of the proprioceptors than muscle, which is amazing. Now we have the technology to see, hey, this system has fascia sites, it has fibroblast sites, so fibroblast cells that spool fascia. So the technology over the last really 10 to 20 years has allowed us to not only say, hey, this system not only exists, but it's viable and it's considered a newly discovered organ in the body because of its proprioceptors and how it facilitates contraction and the stability it gives and how it gets formed and developed. It plays a huge role in the human body, and really, we started to look at it 40 years ago. We started to look at it more closely 20 years ago, but in the last 10 to 15 years is really when this became real because of the imaging equipment, the technology that's allowing us to look at this system and say, wow, it has 10 times more of the proprioceptors than muscle. You know, what's interesting, a lot of track and field athletes for a long, long time have been focused in training on fascia. We didn't, you know, we never knew that we were, you know, training, or we even had this system or this organ in our body, this connective tissue system. And we know we have tendons and we have ligaments, we have muscle, but fascia was never even in the conversation. And when you really think about, you know, medicine ball training, when you think about throwing a medicine ball, you know, what's happening? Like, yeah, muscles go on stretch, yes, but what's holding those muscles together? Fascia it's an extracellular matrix. It's outside the cell. It's everywhere in between individual cells, around the muscle itself, around groups of muscles. So that connective tissue is what's getting stretched along with the muscle. And in research, there was a study at the University of Tokyo back in 2002. The research shows when we perform a dynamic movement such as a jump or a hop or when we sprint, the muscle is more isometrically contracting, where the stretch and the stored elastic energy is really more in the tendon and the connective tissue, the fascia, more than we ever realized. They've done studies up at Harvard with kangaroos. They would put a kangaroo on treadmills and they put a gas mask on kangaroo to measure their caloric expenditure when they walked, you know, a half mile or so, compared to when they hopped, you know, a half mile or a couple hundred feet. And the kangaroo actually expended more energy walking than they did hopping, because fascia and connective tissue is 90% collagen and water. It's non-caloric dependent. It's free energy. So connective tissue, tendons and connective tissue, fascia, is free energy. So we've proven that by studying the kangaroo, and hopping is, you know, getting there faster, getting there quicker, moving at a higher rate, but expending less energy. And it's because the energy stored in the elastic connective tissue. This is huge because humans are the only bipeds that have this same type of connective tissue. Starting here, and then it's right? So we're creating this synergistic motion and activity that is, it's crisp, it's tight, it's uniform, and when we skip like that, we're stressing a lot of systems in a very safe way. I've been training athletes for 30 years, and you know, the big three, the muscular system, the cardiorespiratory system, the nervous system. That's what we looked at, the big three, right? Well, it's really the big four now, this connective tissue system. And I believe this connective tissue system is just as big as a player as the muscular system, the nervous system, cardiovascular system, as we train athletes. And obviously all the systems are always in play, but those are the big three. Now the big four is how I see it in terms of what separates one athlete from the next. It's one of those four systems now. Whether you're talking endurance athlete, an explosive athlete, a strength athlete, whatnot, it's one of those four systems that we know. Now it used to be three. So, the fact that this is so new, when I discovered this, no one really was talking about it, and no one really understood it. Even to this day, even medical doctors, I speak to physical therapists, there's a lot of people still not in the know and understanding how dynamic and how trainable this system is. So the excitement for me is to really share this new information. Kind of like where I was 30 years ago when I started to teach speed training. Back in 1990, no one believed speed can be improved. They thought it was just genetic. And I had to overcome that disbelief. And that was such a fun ride to share with people. Yeah, you can improve speed. And then now a whole industry started. Now there's thousands of speed training facilities around the world, which I think is great. And I help move that or create that paradigm that you can improve speed. I want to do the same with fascia. Fascia is trainable. It's an important part of getting faster. And most importantly, fascia is a key element in injury resiliency. So we talk about building injury resiliency. Well, fascia is probably one of the most common soft tissue areas of the body, systems of the body that gets injured, because when you do a lot of weight training, a lot of people live in that sagittal plane of motion in terms of training. They squat, they bench, they lunge, they deadlift, they military press, they lat pull. They live in the sagittal plane. Well, living in the sagittal plane, yeah, it gets you strong, but it can create overuse injury, and you're getting your muscles strong, but your fascia is not getting strong. So what happens, your muscles are strong and powerful, but now the fascia that's holding that muscle together, giving it its structural integrity, that tears, that breaks down. That's where we get pulls and we get injured. Think of a sausage. The fascia is that casing around the sausage, but it's also in between all the muscle cells. Really important that we get our fascia strong to keep up with our muscles in terms of strength and integrity. Really excited, wrote this book, Fascia Training, with my co-writer, Jonathan Allen, who's a phenomenal writer. We teamed up and performed a bunch of great interviews with the top researchers in the world, and got a lot of great reviews from a lot of high-level people. Dr. Stuart McGill was wrote the foreword for the book, and he was one of the people we interviewed, along with some real high-level experts. Got so much great feedback. Decided to start the Fascia Training Academy, which is a website where we do a lot of different things. We run courses in conjunction with anatomy trains. We run dissection courses. We ran a bunch of unembalmed cadaver dissection courses. We ran one for the NFL strength coaches. We're coming out with a second book now, Fascia Training in Application, because this book kind of lays the groundwork, gives you the background on fascia, gives you the history, gives you more of an understanding of what this system is and what it can do. The second book, Fascia Training and Application, is actually the training exercises of actually how to train fascia. So we're excited about that. And with the Fascia Training Academy, we're going to be now running seminars and educational events to help coaches and trainers and physical therapists, all practitioners, to really understand this system and really maximize their ability with their athletes, with their patients, to really address this newly discovered organ, the fascia system in the body, to optimize health, build injury resiliency, and improve performance. If you're interested to learn more, it's fasciatrainingacademy.com, and just sign up for our newsletter, sign up for our information, and get access to some great content.